Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Community Forum for the Deerpath Golf Course Master Plan Update. Tonight we're going to unveil the next part of this whole program to revitalize Deerpath Golf Course. Before we get started, I've got to ask everyone to please turn your cell phones off. The signal of your cell phone interferes with the wireless microphones, and we want to make sure everybody gets heard tonight. So tonight, we're going to reintroduce a refined plan that was presented to you last fall, and that work was done by our longtime friends Lohman Golf Design, who has worked on the course for 2 decades, and took some input from our last meeting and has tweaked the original plan a bit here. And so we're going to present that tonight. Up on the screen is the agenda that will follow tonight. If I could ask everyone to hold questions until the end. We have a dedicated segment, as you see on the screen there, for question and answer, and we'll stay here as long as you like. So in the interest of getting moving, we're going to get right into this. Tonight's objectives, more than anything, is to get feedback from our golfing public. So you're going to see some concepts up here tonight, and it's very important for us to get to the next step, to get your feedback about what you want and what you don't want. You recall last fall, Bob Kiley, who will be with us later, he's speeding back from a meeting in Iowa, probably breaking the law. But last fall, Bob stood in front of you, said, "We heard you. We heard the complaints from last year. We've taken action. There's been a great deal of work already done on the course. Some trees have been taken down to create better sunshine on the grass. As we speak, the clubhouse is being remodeled. New flooring, the locker rooms are being updated, freshly painted. It's going to look pretty nice, I think. That work is not yet done, but it should be done by opening day. We'll continue to treat the fairways and the greens to get them in better condition than they were last year." So the purpose of tonight, as I mentioned, it's very important for us to get feedback from you. And I'm Second Ward Alderman. You can find my email address on the website. I'm also chair of the Golf Advisory Committee. So I'd love to hear from anybody who thinks of a question after tonight or a comment later on. Keep the flow going, or we'll keep this open for a couple of weeks before we huddle up with Lohman Golf and try to update them. So next step here, we're going to introduce Chuck Myers. He's Superintendent of Parks and Forestry, and he's going to handle the next step, which is getting ready for the upcoming season. Chuck?
All right. I'm going to just talk a little bit about what we've been doing over the last few months out at the course. There's actually a lot going on. We did hear a lot back in the fall and late summer that there were things that needed to be changed out there, and we wanted to address as many as we could without stepping into the long-term plan changes. So I'm just going to talk about what I call the short-term improvements, and then we'll switch over to the master plan. So there's a couple of little sneak previews there. I know you can't see a whole lot from those pictures, but this is just from a couple days ago. The guys are working, it's city staff mainly working on it, but we've had a couple contractors out there as well. But there's a lot going on in the clubhouse. But as I mentioned on the top there, landscape improvements. For that, we have brought on Bergman Landscape Design. They're working on a landscape design for around the clubhouse, behind by the patio, and by the cart barn, and also the front entrance to the course. So we're awaiting their new plan, and we're going to implement that right away. So you should be seeing those kind of changes early in the season. Then also some of the natural areas out there. As you know, many of them were loaded with things like thistle and teasel and stuff like that. They're also being encroached by a lot of woody type plants. So our plan is to burn as many of those as we can this spring. We would have done it this week, but the winds obviously were way too high today, the rain earlier this week. Hopefully next week we can start doing that. In addition, we're going to be doing some herbiciding as well to try to get that thistle under control. Some of that was started last year, but we really need to hit it hard or that's going to take over completely. I mentioned, I'll go into the maintenance shop. Most of you have never seen that, but we're doing some things behind the scene to try to make that more functional. We've already done quite a bit. The lighting was horrible down there. We've replaced all the lights. Our city staff, again, did all of that. It's fantastic. I know that doesn't mean a lot to you, but it's great to see some of those changes. We're still continuing to do a couple more projects down there as well. That is all about efficiency and making sure Kemper and his staff are able to do things the best that they can. So finally, the clubhouse, that's the pictures, obviously. We have made some pretty aggressive moves there. You can tell from the pictures, we've actually done some major remodeling. There will be some new flooring in there. The walls have been changed a little bit. We're pretty excited about it. We did have a designer that came in, and they have been working with us on this. A lot of functional issues as well. You're going to see a whole different look with the kitchen area and how it functions. So we're very excited. I've talked to Rick many times too. He's working with us on this, of course, as well, from the golf course. And we're ready to get this thing going. I would say that it's probably a couple weeks out yet. We are planning on opening the course the 24th. Those improvements won't quite be ready by then, but very soon after. As I mentioned, the dining room as well. The locker room, we took a little bit away from the back of the men's locker room, and we put some storage in there that was greatly needed. So we're excited when we have it done. We hope that you see a whole new look out there. I think it's going to look beautiful. So we also want to let you know a little bit about the course itself. I know that's what really matters to most of you. So I have Rick Walrath, the general manager, is here tonight, and he has a new superintendent he's going to introduce as well, and I'm going to give it to him. He can talk to you about how things are going with the coursework.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. First and foremost, if I don't have your money yet, let's make sure I get your money. We have application forms over there. Do we cover that okay, Tim? I'll bring that up again at the end. Make sure that you do get your annual passes in, since we are going to be open next Thursday. Next Friday is the deadline for your permanent tea time forms, so we'll need those memberships paid in full before then, as well as your fee for that. We will address where the lottery will be held once we have a better idea as far as the construction goes, where we can host it, and those kind of things, so look for updates on that. I'm going to touch on a little bit more and be very brief just about staff in general before I introduce our new superintendent. Josh Weaver is back as our head professional again for what will be his 5th year, along with my 5th year. Unfortunately, Jess Weaver will not be back after 2 years. She's going to remain in Daytona Beach, Florida. And what 22-year-old wouldn't want to be in Daytona Beach, Florida year-round? She's doing very well as an assistant golf professional at another Kemper facility there. Very integral to their ladies program and their juniors program. So those of you who met and interacted with Jess will be happy to know she's doing an excellent job down there. We will replace her with a PGA professional from the Fox Lake area. If you remember one of our interns from a few years ago, Cody Frankie. Cody was an excellent PGM intern with us. His older brother, Craig, is a PGA member, is currently in California working. He'll be coming back in about 2 weeks, and he will take over a spot in the golf shop with us. So we also have Chef Rogelio back in the kitchen, and I'm currently bringing in some new full-time staff for the service areas and the changes you'll see in the dining room and how we take orders and how we fulfill orders and drinks and foods and all those things. Additional staff to handle that. So it'll be an entirely different service model there on the dining room floor. Our largest change as far as personnel goes in the off-season was to relook at the superintendent position, and we brought in somebody who has a wealth of experience, as well as I've had the pleasure of working with in the past. Brian Broman joined us in late February and has hit the ground running since then. Has been working with city staff on not only things that Chuck mentioned, such as tree removal and course conditions and improvements there, but also helping us with our future capital purchases that'll take place, was able to be very integral with city fleet management on improving that portion. So I'll give Brian about a minute or two to introduce himself, tell a little bit about where he's been and what he's seen on the golf course since he's been here, and then after that we'll roll right into Todd on the grounds.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Rick. My name is Brian Broman, as Rick said. I have been now on the property for about 4 weeks, and so I'm still getting my feet wet. I'm very excited about what's going on at Deerpath, all the tremendous improvements with the maintenance shop and the facility itself. Some of the places I've been, to tell you a little bit about myself, I was at Knollwood Golf Club is where I started. I was there for a couple of years as an assistant superintendent. And I've been to such places as the Windstone Golf Club in North Barrington. I was the superintendent at the Cary Country Club out in northwest suburbs. And I was also the superintendent at the Whisper Creek facility, which is out in the Sun City area. A lot of the experiences I have at Cary Country Club, we were primarily annual greens, much like the greens here at Deerpath. So I have a lot of experience in those areas and taking care and manicuring these areas. There are some struggling greens out there. The Oak Grove 15 and 7, we do have some issues out there. Nothing that I haven't seen before, nothing that I am confident that we will not be able to remedy. It's just going to take a little more time with those greens. I've seen the rest of the greens are very promising. We mowed them for the first time today, so we're ready. But I'm very excited to be part of the Lake Forest community here, and I'm very excited to meet all of you and work with you. And my door is always open, and feel free to stop by the maintenance facility, see what we've done out there. But we've got a lot going on, and we're ready to hit the ground running.
All right, great. All right, thank you. All right, with that, I would like to introduce Todd Quitno. He is with Lohman Golf Design. He's been the one working with us on this. Well, I think his boss is down south enjoying the warm weather, but he's the guy that we've had the pleasure of working with. It's been great to work with, so he's going to go over the master plan again.
I have a pointer here.
Yep.
That guy? Okay. Awesome. Well, good evening, everybody. Excited to be here tonight and present our master plan, our master enhancement plan for the golf course. As Tim mentioned in introductions earlier, we've been working here for a long time. My boss, Bob, I believe, started doing projects at the golf course in the early 90s, like 93. I've been with him for 20 years, so I've been involved in several projects out there as well. So we know the golf course pretty well. We know a little bit how it functions and dysfunctions, so we're excited to present some ideas to you guys tonight. Before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about the golf industry briefly. We come in on a lot of these master planning projects lately and talk about doing renovations and spending, millions of dollars. And people say, why are you thinking of spending that much money on our golf course when the golf industry is in such doldrums? And what we tell people is that's actually not true. That, to be honest, these days golf is a very, very healthy sport. It's not going gangbusters like it did 10 years ago, but that's probably a good thing. But as an industry in general, golf is nearly a $70 billion industry. I don't think a lot of people realize that, how many reaches it has in the communities and across the nation. There's about 25 million people who play golf annually. That's 455 million rounds. And what I find interesting is that 9 out of 10 of those rounds are on public facilities, like Deerpath Golf Course. So it's very important right now that public facilities are positioning themselves to keep those 25 million Americans golfing, but also to start to look at the 32 million people who are interested in playing the game. So there's a lot of potential revenue out there, healthy opportunities to bring more people into the game if we have the right facilities for them. This is a stat from a couple of years ago. In 2014, 2 million people tried golf for the first time. That was the most since 2002. So you can see that we're starting to get kind of back on our feet with growing the game a little bit. Of those, there was a lot of youth growth. The youth golfers grew 29% to 30.2 million participants in 2014. The millennials, the young kids, the juniors, those are the people we need to focus on, besides the seasoned golfers, to try to get our game to continue to be healthy and grow. But there's opportunities out there, especially in, you see here, 25% of those were young ladies. Golf is hugely important to the environment, especially in the urbanized areas that we live in the Chicago area. And it's a big focus of the industry in general. You'll see here that 77% of 18-hole facilities have taken steps to conserve energy. And there's a lot of that, a bit of that we'll discuss tonight at Deerpath and ways we can do that. It's an important topic. And more than 70% of a golf course, a typical 18-hole golf course, is considered green space that provides many, many benefits to the ecosystem. It's a message that I think needs to be spread around the community and around the nation, that golf is good for the environment and for the community. And then golf is simply finally getting its recognition as a great fitness activity. I didn't know if you know this, but walking 18 holes is equal to a 5-mile walk or a 3.5-mile run, or if you're Fitbit people, 10,000 plus steps. So it's a great game, and I think that's a message that really needs to be important in the Deerpath improvements that we present in the next few years, however we do the project, that golf is healthy and we're trying to react to that. So with that, talk about the master plan or the master enhancement plan. There's really two primary topics that the master plan covers. And the first of that is maintenance upgrades. We looked at the 18-hole golf course and said, we've got some issues that are going on right now that really don't allow Deerpath to present it, to Brian and his crews to present their best face. There's issues with conditioning on the greens, we know that. There's accessibility issues with poor drainage and flooding. And so that's a big part of the master plan, is how do we address those and get the best out of what you have in the facility today. And then the second part of our master plan is course enhancements. How can we attend to that future growth and create revenue generating opportunities on the golf course with upgrades? As we put it here, long-term environmental and economic sustainability. How can you stay viable in a tough competitive market? We're also going to talk a bit about the clubhouse, what can be done to improve that beyond what's already being done to simply enhance player experience. We talk about player experience a lot in golf. It starts at the parking lot and it ends after 18 holes. Well, actually it ends after the 19th hole. But that's a very important part of the plan as well. And then we'll get into a little bit later, what is it going to cost to do this and what do we see the benefits of upgrading the golf course. So that's kind of our agenda. So let's get into the maintenance upgrades. One major thing that we are addressing on the master plan, and just to give you a kind of a heads up, we're not going to go in detail, hole by hole, item by item, bunker by bunker. These are kind of broad-based ideas, so just be prepared that you're not going to see every single hole. But we know that drainage on Deerpath Golf Course is an issue. Beyond just the floodplain aspect of the course, that's something that's not controllable. But what is controllable, and Brian, you said you're just getting your feet wet. I guarantee you are getting your feet wet out on the golf course. I had an opportunity this fall to walk the course after about a 2-inch rain. And what I did when I walked the course was mapped the areas that are simply, they were soaked. The soil was soaked. You can't, and when you have wet fairways, You can't get carts onto the golf course. You can't get maintenance equipment on the golf course. Conditioning suffers, revenue suffers. So a huge focus of the master plan is how do we rectify those drainage issues. So we're looking at all of the fairways, trying to put drainage systems in that can move the water into the out-of-play areas. And it's kind of a dual system. This is just an example of even when floods recede at Deerpath, you have puddling that occurs, or after small rains. There's a lot of new technologies on the market that can rectify that. This is one of them that we're considering. It's called slit drainage, where you literally go in and cut slits into the fairway areas. You put sand into those and pipe into those slits, and you capture the water and move it off to other areas. This is a kind of a low impact way to do it. The other way to do it is to tear up all your fairways and regrade everything and try to move water. So this is a consideration we're trying to do to kind of minimize disruption. The other thing we're looking at is, besides getting the water off the fairways, how do we just get carts out onto the golf course? And obviously, a full cart path system would be huge at Deerpath. To get people onto the golf course, even if the conditions aren't perfect, if the soil's still a little bit wet. So the plan actually calls for tee to green cart paths on all 18 holes. The other part about the cart paths that has been discussed is their potential for their use and during off-season, cross-country trails, things like that, so some multi-use. And as I say here, course accessibility after storms is really your major hindrance right now to cart and green fees. The other thing we want to do is, if we collect all of that water in pipes, we have to take it somewhere. And so if you remember the project from, I think it's been 10 years almost now, up by hole 14 and 5 and 12, where we created some wetland areas, that's another part of the plan, is to create basin areas where we can take the water that we capture, move it off into the side, and let it infiltrate into the ground, versus trying to push it into the creek, which is very tough to do. So we've proposed areas on the golf course to create more of this, expanding NOMO areas where they're not in play, because we understand pace of play is a huge issue. We want to keep pace of play going, but where we can minimize or reduce turf maintenance, start to have less mowed areas, use less water, all of the above. So that's a big focus of the plan. We're also looking at the greens for drainage reasons, and Brian mentioned you had a couple greens come out of the winter that were struggling. The greens at Deerpath struggle primarily because they don't have a good drainage system in them. They're old push-up greens from years past, the majority of them, which means they're just soil-based greens. And so there's a technology that was similar to what I showed you on the fairways that's being completed on greens all over Chicago, all over the United States, with same slit drainage process, where you literally go in and put a drainage system in the greens. You take the sod off, flip it back on, and 2 days later you can play the golf course. But why is it important to drain the greens? I don't know how I'm doing that, but sorry. The reason it's important to drain the greens is because if you can get the water out of that subsystem, you can get air into there, and you give room for the roots of the turf to grow. And with healthy roots, you get a healthy plant. And Brian said this a few meetings ago. What does healthy turf mean? Well, it means good conditioning, first of all, but it also means the use of less water, less fertilizer, less chemicals, and ultimately greater sustainability, which is a huge focus of our plan. So the greens, that's really the biggest focus on the greens. When we do that project, when we put the drainage into the greens, we also have some opportunities we've seen out there where we could capitalize on having the greens down for a couple days, maybe expand in some areas to recapture lost pinning space, and give the greens a little bit of a freshened look. Another part of that, and we don't get into this too much tonight, but we want to selectively look at the trees that are impacting the turf. Shade and drainage are the two biggest negatives for healthy greens, and 7 and 15 we know are an issue, and we're looking at that as part of the plan, very selective removals. Another part of the plan that is a maintenance upgrade is tees, and really primarily the addition of forward tees for the women, for the seniors, and also to attract the younger players. This actually goes hand in hand with the cart path project potentially, because we will generate a lot of material dirt material from the cart paths that can be used to build tees. But right now, just to give you an idea, I believe the ladies play somewhere around 55 or 5,600. We're proposing that tee to be down in the 4,800 range and leaving the seniors at about 5,500. And honestly, the industry standard is actually for the forward tees to be at about 60 to 70% of the back tees. So you're not a 7,000 yard golf course, but that's an easy number to use. If you were a 7,000 yard golf course, industry standard or recommendations is to put the tees at around 43 or 4,400. But the way this golf course lays out, we think 4,800 is a pretty good compromise and a good length. We also see some opportunities to adjust some of the back tees on the golf course, add a little interest, add a little length, add some new angles of play, and this is just one example of several. But here we're proposing to take the back tee on 4, which is right here, and actually utilize that for hole 11 and for hole 4, so that we can actually extend hole 11 as a longer par 4 dog leg, eliminating some of the safety issues by 7 green and 8 tee. But then you'll see here we've proposed various pads for the various tee markers. The reason this kind of works with 4 is because the proposed cart path system would take the cart path up along the left side of 3 green, and you could access 4 tees from that side. By moving 4 tees, we also create room to create one of those wet basins that we talked about. So it all kind of works together. Another maintenance upgrade on the golf course that we're looking at, and the sand bunkers, you'll remember, we're done with the pond project on the north end. So they're about 10 years old. The basic lifespan for sand in a bunker with no kind of lining underneath it is about 5 to 7 years. So you're actually past your lifespan. You probably had about 70 years in your bunkers before we did them 10 years ago, but at any rate, the reason sand has a lifespan is because it gets dirty. You've probably seen this on the golf course. The sand erodes, dirt gets in there, it plugs up the actual sand, doesn't let the water through. There's a lot of bunkers on your golf course that don't drain already. So there's a technique out there that's very popular and works very well, where you would take the sand out of the existing bunkers, you put in, this is actually gravel that you see here, it's a 2-inch gravel layer, and you spray a polymer system on it. It's a liner for the bunker, and it allows the sand to be flashed up in the faces without falling, without moving, without getting dirty, and it basically helps for the long-term sustainability of the sand bunkers on the golf course. So the proposal on the course is to change a few of the bunkers here and there, tweak some, but generally keep them where they are, but improve their structure and their construction method. But that's not the big picture ideas. So we have a few thoughts on what can we do to increase revenue on the golf course. And these are what we call our big picture ideas. And the first one is out on the course. There's been mention in several of our meetings that the par 3s at Deerpath are kind of all the same length, especially if you play the white tees. They're like 180 yards or something like that, 175 yards. And so to get a little bit of variety and a little more interest in the par 3s, we have a couple of proposals. The more simple one is on hole 5. If you're familiar with that hole, there's 2 giant cottonwoods on the left side that are scheduled, I think, for removal already, which would open up a huge area to the left where we could expand the tee and actually shorten the back side of that tee, which is fairly unsafe in terms of its relationship with hole number 4 green. But by doing that, we could shorten the hole a bit, down to 173 yards, 157 yards. And we also create a new angle that actually would come in from the left side more over the pond with some remodeled bunkering around the green and just give that hole a little bit of a new look. That's one idea. Another idea is on the 13th and 14th holes is to actually take, and by the way, I'll mention the comfort station. That's in the plan as well, which this would generally be the location of that. Don't want to miss that part. But on hole 13, we are looking for a place where we could actually get a short hole. That's one thing Deerpath is missing. And so what we've proposed here is to use the existing tee and play to a new green that sits in that mounded area where all the spoils that came out of this pond have been piled up. And this hole would actually be as short as 115 to 130 yards. And it would really start to break up those long par 3s. It could be right along the water. It could be a really interesting golf hole. set into those mounds. And that also opens up an opportunity to pull the tees back on the 14th hole and create a really dynamic short par 5 where you have a real heroic carry over the wetlands. And then you thread the needle through the trees to try to score a par 5. It pushes the par up to 71, which Rick has said is a little bit more marketable than par 70. So it starts to open a few opportunities while kind of covering that idea of getting this variety in the par 3 yardages. Our next idea revolves around the practice center. And the concept being that with a better practice facility, we can cater to different uses. The golfer that comes to the course just to practice right now, you have a very limited access. You have maybe 10 stations, I believe, in a grass tee that's so small that it's generally always chewed up. Just to give you perspective, this is the existing clubhouse. Your putting green is right in here, and your practice tee is right between these red marks. So our proposal is to expand that range tee so that you can accommodate at least up to 20 golfers at one time, and from back to front be able to move the markers over a season and have healthy turf. In order to do that, there's two things that would accompany that. First of all, the putting green would be taken out, and we would expand the tee back towards the clubhouses, basically to the path. And then you'll see here, well, this is actually where the 10th tee is right now. We would push the 10th tee to the east, which is actually a nice angle to play the hole. It gives it a little bit of a dog leg, and push the tees on one a bit to the east, and expand that range tee in that direction. And that gives us a 200 by 200 square foot tee, almost an acre of turf for the practice center. Long term, we're looking at the possibility, and this actually coincides with something I'll talk about in a minute, of taking the 16th green and relocating it and using that old 16th green as a short game chipping area. So dedicated practice for chip shots could be putted on. Just another dynamic to the practice options at the golf course. One thing to mention too, this tee would still have the synthetic mats at the back, which is very important, especially this time of year. With the rest of the practice facility then, we're looking at, because we've lengthened it, we've got more room through the facility. We could still keep a teaching tee probably down in the northwest end. You'll see this area now is being used for junior lessons. We've got a new area for that I'll show you in a minute. But the range itself would just be cleaned up with, good targets that emulate golf, the gamification of golf. I keep giving Rick a hard time. He made that word up. But these would look like real greens and then a real practice fairway. So you start to emulate real golf. So then the second part of the practice facility concept is to create an enhanced short game area in the location where you have the short game now. So just to give you perspective, here's hole number 1. This is the clubhouse. This red square is the current cart barn. The idea, and I told you a minute ago, to move the tee back, we would lose the putting green. So the idea is to put a new putting green basically in the location of the cart barn, and I'll explain where the cart's going a bit, and then create kind of a dynamic short game / junior area in the existing short game area. And the way this would work is on certain days, it would be managed by the club or by the staff. You could play off of this this synthetic turf area, and it could be a short iron range where you have a 40-yard green, a 60-yard green, and an 80-yard green. So basically pitch shots. That's one possible use. Another possible use is then to use these greens in a 3-hole routing of 60 to 80-yard holes where you play to there, and you play to there, and you play to there for use in the junior program. And the last part of that is if there's no one using it as a pitching range or as a junior course, you could come out here and utilize these bunkers for short game practice in a multitude of ways, hitting from various angles into the various greens. So it would be a multi-function facility. The management of it would be controlled by staff, but it would add tremendously to the overall practice experience at the golf course. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the IDOT project that has been lurking around the golf course. And to give you in a nutshell what it's about is IDOT approached the city about putting together some sort of remediation for the drainage issues, the flooding that goes on under the I-41 viaduct. And one proposal, and this was a couple of years ago, was to create retention ponds on the golf course to divert that water that collects here into those ponds, hold it on the course for a bit, and have a controlled release of it back into the sewer system or the storm system. So that has been incorporated into the current master plan, and you'll see we still have a pond on 17 and 18 and a pond on hole 1 to accomplish IDOT's goals. But what's a little bit different on this plan than what was presented a couple years ago is we've taken it a step further and have now proposed the flip-flopping of holes 17 and 18. And the purpose of that is it's dual-fold, really. It's, first of all, to create some better finishing holes. You know, you have a short par 4 17th that kind of plays up and over the hill, and we've always been concerned about a pond being up and over that hill. But this would give us the opportunity to make 17 a long, sturdy par 4 that could actually, from the back tee, potentially play from the side of the sled hill that's there. It's kind of being unused. A really interesting kind of over the valley, onto the bluff, and down to the green that would sit along, you see it here, sit along the edge of the IDOT pond. And then the 18th tee would be kind of pushed over along the east side by the maintenance building. See it right here. And it would play up and over. There's a big mound on 17. It would play right through that mound, actually to the existing 18th green. And to do this, that's when we would want to move the 16th green, so that the 16th green comes over and ends right at the 17th hole, and you have a nice flow of finishing holes. And again, that opens up that area by the range for short practice. So that's the idea that we've presented with the IDOT project. What this does, the added benefit, is by moving away from the number 17 tee, which is actually right here on the plan, it opens up room for potential expansion of the clubhouse, which is what we'll talk about next. We've proposed, here I'll show you in detail, this is the 17th tee. If we take that out of play and move everything basically to the west, we now have room in the future to either create an area for a clubhouse expansion, or for a tent, or for a patio, or for all of the above. We also create a potential area if we did do a building expansion to put carts inside underneath to protect them from wear and tear. We've proposed also basically a realigned or rebuilt parking area with the possibility of a dedicated entry lane that would actually take you up kind of through a alley of trees and into a drop-off area for golf and banquets or whatever occurs at the course. This facility, the idea behind expanding it is to be able to handle the larger events at the golf course. Right now, there's a limit to how big an outing can be because there's nowhere to basically feed people after the outing. There's also no room for other types of events that are non-golf uses that could be a potential if this were done. And again, what we talked about earlier, the whole idea of this is to enhance the user experience, create a patio space that people want to stay at after the round and spend some money. It's all about building revenue, building more users. So my final slide, and then I'll hand it back to Tim, is what do we see as the perceived benefits overall of this master plan? Well, first of all, and this is a very, very specific thing, but increased cart revenue. As we said, if we can minimize downtime on the golf course, we can get carts back on the course, there's a substantial amount of money that could potentially be saved on a yearly basis or made on a yearly basis. We want to get the golf course back open quicker. Get Brian's crews out there, get golfers out there, lose fewer days, don't have a reputation for losing days. So those are some of those maintenance issues. If we can get better conditioning on our turf and reduce our maintenance inputs, it's an energy saver all the way around. Healthy turf. Healthy turf is great. It's good for playability. It's good for energy savings, all of the above. We mentioned maintenance equipment. More appeal for the people that are playing the course now, for seniors, for ladies, and then more draw for the juniors that are out there looking to play the game and learn the game. And then, as we just mentioned, more capacity for groups and outings and everyday play. and really just enhancing the overall experience of the golf course. And with that, timing, maybe 2018. I think, Tim, you're going to go into that a little bit more, but that's it for me.
Thank you, Todd. There's no quit in Todd Quit Now.
There is none.
All right, this is where the club face meets the ball, for lack of a better metaphor. Estimates, and these are very, very broad estimates. Nothing has been bid out, so these are purely estimates. Loman Golf helped us with most of these estimates, so they're broken into a couple areas here. First is course maintenance, which we view as a first priority. Cart paths, as Todd talked about, tees, native areas, et cetera. The estimate for that is somewhere between $1.8 and $2 million. Course enhancements, the driving range you saw, the short game area that you saw, all these ways of modernizing the course and the playability and attractiveness of the course and its facility to the public. We estimate that as $2 to $2.5 million. Next, we have the enhanced clubhouse. Todd made mention of a banquet facility, lower level cart storage, building upgrades, a lot of which are underway already, an enhanced patio. This presents opportunities for larger outings, maybe more frequent outings, 2.2 to 2.5 million. And finally, the costs and things that go with shutting down a course, we would envision something like an August 1st close and a reopen the following May or June to accommodate the changes. We do them all at once so that we would have one interruption and not several years worth of interruption. $1 million to $1.5 million, that includes lost play in those shoulder seasons. So together, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 8.3 million. The timeline, Todd mentioned IDOT. IDOT may have some involvement in this project. I know staff is meeting with IDOT to discuss the next phase on April 7th, so we don't know anything until at least that meeting occurs. We want to gather input from the public, work with City Council and the Park Board, and ongoing work with the Golf Advisory Committee. So we've got a few folks here tonight. Scu Walker, who is on the Park Board and is also on the Golf Advisory Committee. Mike Edelman, who's the 4th Ward Alderman, also on the Golf Advisory Committee. And we have Prue Beidler, who's a 1st Ward Alderman, excuse me. And we also have Charlie Kohlmeyer, who's chair of the Park Board. So we're all working together to try to get this right, because we think we really only have one shot at getting it right. Okay, so now it's time for questions and answers. So, yes, in the back. Hold on, please.
Having attended the meeting in the fall, the issue then was cash. And of course, maintenance, even maintenance, in terms of the city's contribution, looked to be a significant problem. So I presume that the maintenance activity is first on the agenda, is much more significant than even what was anticipated, certainly in the fall. So where is the money coming from?
Well, let me make sure I understand the question, because Todd touched on that. If we undertake some of these improvements, there's going to be actually less maintenance. And I don't know if Todd or Rick could talk about that.
Thanks. Jim, as far as the maintenance aspect, to address the side issue Tim had, the things that we're proposing to do in the maintenance portion will enhance the overall health of the turf. And as Brian briefly touched on when he was speaking, when you have healthier turf, when you have deeper roots, the end result is less water, better usage of the water that's out here, less chemicals, less money. It takes less time to do all these things. The enhancements that Todd spoke of in the native areas where the water is moving to there, those are areas that do not need to be taken care of as frequently as rough or turf that you actually play off of. So those are some of the cost savings. I'm not sure that was the exact thrust of your question, but That's the main reason those portions are put up at the top of the list, is it brings us back to standard, if you will, and then we'll see some dramatic improvements from there.
I think one of the things, and maybe I apologize for arriving late, maybe Todd explained this in his opening comments, but one of the directions that the city gave Todd and Loman from the very beginning was that we wanted to see return on investment for the improvements that were being proposed, for the exact reason that you talked about. Rick mentioned some of the potential reductions in cost for the maintenance, but we also said we need to drive more revenue. And that's why the continuous cart path was such an important piece of this, why the expanded driving range is an important piece of this, why the junior golf component of it is such an important piece of it. So while, as Tim said, we won't know until we get into the season and we can see more fully what those financial impacts will be, the idea was to increase revenue and to the extent that we can try and bring down some costs to balance that out. Now, the other thing I think we talked about last time, too, is there's a lot of things changing in the golf market. There's some material here that says that the future of golf is bright and so forth. But we also have 2 courses around us that are sort of in the state of flux, too. And so, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is we don't have to make any drastic actions. If, for example, in Highland Park, they're talking about investing in one course and closing one down, if we pick up 2,000 rounds from that course closing, that significantly changes our balance sheet. And so those are some of the things that we're looking at incrementally over time to achieve a position of where this course is self-sustaining again like it was for so many years. I will say, though, that if you take a look, and the council just saw this Monday night at their budget meeting, for the next few years it does show a subsidization of about $100,000 a year from the city's general fund to the golf fund. Did that answer the question?
There's still a big gap at first, I think.
Well, I'm not sure the gap is quite as big. It's not $500,000 like you were talking about, because really, if you look at the operating costs of the golf course breaks even. It's when you add on the $100,000 roughly of annual debt that we have is when it goes upside down, if you will. So from a revenue and expense standpoint, golf breaks even. It's just the debt cost is what really affects our bottom line. And I think the current debt that's online has only 6 years to go. And then the course becomes debt-free.
2 different questions. One is, I saw the big buckets of cost. Is there any rationale, a good one, that says this is broken into phases, or is it all or nothing? That's the first question. And then 2, at least from prior experience, the food revenue, back to Bob's comment about revenue being part of the case, the food revenue can often, in certain installations that I'm familiar with, outstrip the revenue from golf. So that gets back to the phasing question in terms of balancing how much outflow versus how much income, about why phases might be important in this because of the impact on revenue.
If you looked at Todd's presentation, a lot of what goes on in the design has a domino effect. So if you move the practice facility back to where the putting green was, then the putting green has to go somewhere, and so it goes to where the cart barn is. And then so the carts have to go somewhere, and so they've got to go underground. So we're committed at some point to doing a substantial part of this plan or nothing at all. We could maybe skip some of this, but we'd have to go back to Loman for a plan B and see. We want to hear what it is that the golfers want. I mean, you've seen this presentation. We'll get to really the bigger picture about how we're going to pay for this in a minute, but if we could just focus for a little bit on your reaction to this plan without talking about how we're going to finance it. So, I mean, do you like the layout here? Do you like the comfort station? Do you like switching the holes? Let's have some feedback. Yes, here. Hold on, please.
Is there any plan to do something about the entrance off of Deerpath? It's so dangerous coming in and out.
Bob, you want to talk about that one? I think there is a few things going on.
I guess the answer I would give you right now is sort of. And what I mean by that is in our recent conversations about the IDOT project, and I don't know if you have a map that you can put up there, Todd or Tim? Yeah. Well, if you go down to Deerpath, there you go. I think the issue you're referring to is if you want to take a left turn into the entrance, you sort of take your life into your hands. We did at one point in time look at what would be the cost and ability to add a left turn lane there. And really what you would need to do is figure the south side of Deerpath to allow enough width so a car could still get around when you're taking your left-hand turn. That design has been prepared. The problem is that it's costly at this point in time. But number two is that we knew that the IDOT project was going to occur. And so our hope is in our conversations with IDOT that we will be able to redesign that and also redesign the entrance and maybe open it up a little so you have better sight lines when you're coming out of the driveway and you want to take a right-hand turn or a left-hand turn, that you can see traffic that's on Deerpath going east or west a little better.
I don't think you've heard any feedback on the plan yet.
Right.
Right. So,
You're my hero.
so I would say, as a golfer, I think this is very intriguing. I think it's very interesting. We're looking for more opportunity to practice, again, making an expanded practice area. You change some holes that are interesting. I think 17 and 18, that's very interesting. I think it's really good from a golf perspective. And we like, we love this golf course, and I think anything that makes it more fun to play would be awesome. And this does seem to be going in that direction, so I like that very much. That's my feedback. And then my one question is, I don't see a well anymore, or I ever heard a well. So is that off the planning, or?
Well, we talked about this at the Finance Committee meeting this past Monday, and if you look at the annual water expense for the golf course, it's something like $60,000. And the last estimate we saw for a well was a big number, like $1.5 million maybe. So if you do the payback math on that, $1.5 million divided by 60, and as you heard earlier, if these maintenance, if the course gets redesigned such that it requires better drainage, actually means less water. So it could be that our water bill goes down to $40,000. If that were the case, then the payback period is 30, 40 years, and it just really doesn't make sense.
Okay, so one counter to that is the water plant has a capacity. It's a reverse osmosis water plant with a certain capacity. We went through a drought a few summers ago where we had to go, when we started the alternate water, and now we're on that. So, and the question was whether Deerpath had to adhere to that, and I think we did to some degree.
We did.
So the risk there would be, what happens if that happens again? And then you put all this money into improved turf, and you have to let the greens die.
I think that's an excellent point, John, and that is, taking the well aside, that is one more very strong push behind a lot of these, particularly drainage improvements, so that you can build a healthier turf. You can build a turf that is more drought resistant. You just think about it in terms of the roots drinking for the plant. If they're little tiny ones, they can only take little tiny sips, so it doesn't, you have to water more frequently. If you get very deep root systems, then when you water less frequently, it can still maintain its health. So you're exactly right in your memory. We did have a drought. Our water bill went up to over $80,000. But this past year, when we had a more favorable water season, it was closer to 50, I believe. So there is a significant variation year to year. But getting the turf healthier with these, particularly drainage ideas, those projects will make it easier, and then it may make city water more palatable in a business sense.
Another advantage too is when you're Another advantage too is the variety of grasses. When you're doing a renovation, you're able to change the variety of grass that's out there, and so they're more drought resistant, more disease resistant. And so using a different variety of grass, not only is it better for putting and playability, but it's also better for recovery and during stressful periods such as droughts and big storms when you have water sitting on your golf course for longer.
I was going to say the exact same thing, but what I do want to say, and Rick made this point, and Brian will learn, I assume, when he starts mowing, is that you've said that the way the place has been maintained in the last many years is you water, mow, because you're not getting any penetration of your roots, so you're just trying to keep the thing alive. And to Brian's point, these new grasses that you can put on putting greens, and that is part of the project that I really didn't mention. If we were to shut the course down to do the construction, it allows you that opportunity to regrass. It's happened all over the Chicago area, all over the country, really, but you get deeper roots, and so you can tolerate longer periods of no water better. I mean, it's not ideal, and with fairways and roughs, you're a little less concerned about that because you can bring those back. But greens, a better grass means opportunity.
In the back.
Thanks. By way of some feedback, I do think that shortening up a couple of the par threes is a positive move. I know a lot of other people that really aren't interested in playing at Deerpath because the par threes are a slog, they're not fun. A lot of people can't even reach the greens in one. So if you shorten up a couple of them, put up whatever you want in the way in terms of sand and water. People just like fun on par threes, I think. So that would be a good move.
Thank you. Anyone else?
As far as feedback goes, I'm very much in favor of what your ideas are. I think it looks great. I have one question, though, that you mentioned that when this were to happen, you might close the course down in August and not open up until sometime in May. Will the city or the course be in contact with any other courses that we can get some sort of a arrangement with to play our golf?
Yeah, absolutely, Dick. That would be a primary concern of ours. Not only how do we take care of the existing ones, what kind of promotions or offers, or what can we do to our current customer base of members to entice them to stay with us through the program. So there's a lot of different models out there. There's paying in advance for when we do reopen and you get a benefit by holding the price. There's working with other local courses. Obviously, the City of Lake Forest and the City of Lake Bluff have relationships, and we both have golf courses. Highland Park, we have golf courses in the area that Kemper also manages. So there's a litany of different levers that we can pull to try to make something that's palatable to the membership so that you're not just out of a golf course for that time. That's a critical point of what we want to do during this process.
I have just two questions. One concerning the improvement or the change to the clubhouse itself. Could you be a little bit more expansive in terms of what that would entail other than the storage area beneath the new clubhouse?
You want to talk about that? Let's go. I'm happy to talk about it. Is this the best slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
My best answer is going to be we don't know yet. The cost that we put together, we actually asked a local group. We kind of put together a wish list based on a rectangle on a plan and said, hey, if we were thinking about this, we wanted to have a banquet space that could seat full-size outing, which is 144 people, and had a bar service and an improved kitchen as the first floor, and then cart storage underneath. What would it generally cost to do that? And honestly, that's as far as we got. We basically doubled the size of the building with our estimate, like 3,500 square feet. And the numbers that were presented were based on that amount of information. So if that's a route that you'd want to go, there needs to be another level of study. That's as far as we got with that.
Okay, second part of the question is, what is your general timeline other than 2018 with a question mark to be more specific?
You heard mention of this IDOT project, and that is their preliminary timeline right now. As I said, staff has a meeting with IDOT on April 7th. where I think they'll learn a lot more about what that timeline might actually be. Because part of what they do, if I remember correctly, there's some piping that is involved, and it would involve ripping up some of the stuff that we would have already remodeled. So it would be better use of everyone's time and money if we did it all together. And so they have it penciled in for 2018. That gives us time to plan, and so there's a benefit there, but they're not firm with us yet.
Can I ask the group a question? Let me go back to the clubhouse comment that was raised and earlier about dollars and generating revenues, because Lohman and Kemper did, I think, a very nice job that says one area that you could really grow revenues would be in the banquet/outing area. And there's no question that we could generate a lot of money that way. But there are also downsides to that, too, in terms of the impact on the course possibly being closed certain days while there's outings going on. And so we've heard a lot of positive about this plan, but I guess I want to push all of you to say, what don't you like about the plan, or what don't you want to see out there? Because that will help us as we continue to move forward to plan for what we do or don't do on the course. Don't all jump in at once.
Thank you. My name is Kent Carson, and I think that you've done a very good job with all the limitations you've had. So I'd like to compliment you on a fine plan. I think that if you say maybe there's some opportunities to go back and look at the plan, perhaps maybe one opportunity would be to take the existing clubhouse and move it to the back of the existing parking lot now. So completely relocate the existing clubhouse. And the reason for that is because right now we're fighting a lot of traffic around the clubhouse. I'm talking about going to the first hole, coming off the 18th, going to the driving range, and now you'll even have more if you put a practice along the parallel of the first hole. So to me, with the expanded driving range and hopefully more participation from everybody, I would see maybe a bottleneck becoming where the existing clubhouse is today, just from a foot traffic, golf traffic standpoint. So that might be, if you want an idea to probably look at, that might be something that you could take into consideration. The next thing is along the third hole, third fairway, as you know, that obviously is the biggest flooded area and so forth. I just don't know how you're going to solve that problem. God bless you if you can do that. It's just that, it is low. It's lower if you're standing in the fairway. It's lower than the banks of the creek. So that becomes an ongoing problem, and water can only go so far. So I just wouldn't sell a lot. I just wouldn't talk a lot about we're going to fix the drainage, because you do have some limitations. And I know that you're trying everything you can. I applaud you for that. I think you need to be realistic that there are going to be some spots that are going to be wet, and we'll deal with it. By putting in cart paths through the entire thing, then at least you can have, cart path only play in some instances. I just think that we've all played that course long enough, and we know that there are some limitations to it. And I think we just need to all face that. So overall, I compliment the design, and Tim, I do whatever I can to help support you, because this would be a great undertaking if we could do that.
If I can just say something, first of all, thank you for the compliment and the comments, but your point is right on the money regarding hole 3 and regarding the golf course in general, and I probably didn't make that real clear. One thing that no one should take away from this meeting is that we're going to stop the golf course from flooding. I think hopefully everyone knows that. But what we can improve, and we're not going to be able to make 3 perfect. But if we can avoid those little storms that mess 3 up, and we're not trying to put the water back into the creek because the creek is your biggest problem. We're trying to make it go down. And so if we can resolve some of those little things and start to make steps in that direction, kind of to what you said, that's what we're going for. You're still going to flood. You're a 90% of the golf course is a floodplain or something to that effect. So duly noted and appreciate the comment and that it was brought up.
Todd, can you pull up the overall map? Do we have one with the overall? And one thing to point out, Kent, that I wanted to think of. If you have, go back one page then, just where we were. If you see, there you go, back to the short game area. If you look at your map and you have your magnifying glasses out, you'll see a square with a circle in it, like right in front of the first, in front of the new practice green. You see this square with all the little hash marks on it? Down a little bit, the drainage bunk. Those areas, just south of all these areas, you'll see them throughout the golf course. Basically, they look like little circles with a dot in the middle, and you'll see lines. Those are all catch basins. Those are areas that are going to be hollowed out and moved to do exactly what Kent's talking about. The golf course is not going to drain of water because that creek goes over the banks. 3 is not going to drain of water. But if you can get the drainage that's created in the 3rd fairway to go west into an expanded native area, and that area is prepared for that water, then yeah, the water's still going to be standing there, but we can get open faster. And I can't emphasize Todd's second point there enough, which is 2.5 inches of rain, we're closed, everybody's closed. We'll be able to play faster. It's the 1/2 inch of rain. It's the 3/4 inch of rain that comes in a deluge that we can't get off the property for 2 days. Those are the things that are really hindering our ability to get on the golf course and make revenue.
One more comment, I won't belabor the point beyond that, but Brian made the point today. There was some rain last night, I believe. He went out to the left side of hole 6 and opened up one of the old box catch basins that has 5 or 6 pipes coming into it, and there's no water flowing. And so what that means is that a lot of the system that's out there now isn't working. And I know when we did the bunker project 10 years ago, we tied into some tiles that had been there since 19 whatever, way before I was around. And I know that they're not working. And so part of our investigation when we get into the details of this plan is to actually go out and find the tiles that are working, utilize those, but then enhance or replace the ones that aren't. So.
Okay, let's go ahead. Yes, please.
With respect to the drainage, this slit drainage thing that you're talking about, you made it sound pretty easy, and easy to me is probably less expensive. Could a lot of that work be done before this 18 big project?
If I were to recommend, which I have, what would be the best to do before this big project, it's exactly that, and especially in the greens. It's not easy in terms of the labor, but it is a fairly painless process. We just did it last year at a public project in Peoria Park District. It was about a 3-week project. They did 15 of the 18 greens. This crew went in and flipped the sod up, put all the drainage in, flipped the sod back down. We even stole sod from a golf course that was closing and expanded the greens, and they were back on it 2-3 weeks later. So that is a project you could go in the spring of the year, very little impact on the golf course and play, and make tremendous a tremendous improvement in your greens. You could do it in the fall. It's usually a shoulder season project, but yes, it's very possible that that's something that could be done. And the other part about that is, I think we counted, you could do 17 of the 18 greens and not come back and pull it out because of the other project, which is important as well. The only one that would change would be the 17th green. So.
Okay, you've been patient about funding, so let's spend a little bit of time. I want to introduce you to a couple people. So back to the total cost here, 8.3 million is the estimate of the total cost in the upper end. And I can say with certainty that 8.3 million is beyond the capacity of the city to finance by itself. Fair statement, Bob? Fair statement. So we've got a couple slides here. Chuck, do you mind if we come back to this in just a little bit? The second item here is something called a public-private partnership. And I think you recently saw that with the successful remodeling of Forest Park at the lakefront at the foot of Deerpath, and that was nearly all privately funded. So we're going to borrow from that idea to remodel Deerpath. And here's kind of what we're working on right now for possible funding sources. So the city might be able to come up with, through bonding or whatever other sources, 3.5 to 4.1. We talked about IDOT putting in a couple ponds. If they stage their work on the parking lot, they may pay to replace the parking lot. So they may be able to make a contribution here. Then the private sector of this, 2.8 to 3.3. And so I'm going to spend just a minute talking about the private part of this thing. This is a map from about 100 years ago of the land that became Deerpath Golf Course. And you'll see very prominently one particular name. A.B. Dick has big pieces of the property. He donated to the city, and along with some other people. You can see here, Deerpath Road here, the creek along here, and the course ends to the north roughly where Laurel Avenue came through, and on the west where, before 41, there was still the railroad tracks. So that really encompasses what Deerpath is today. And we happen to have with us tonight the great-granddaughter of Albert Dick, and her name is Maddie Dugan, and she is here tonight. And Maddie, you want to come up and say a couple of words?
I never knew my great-grandfather who gave this land to the city, unfortunately. I hear he was a wonderful man. I think it's been his and the Jones and the Noble Judas and the Clouds and the other people who donated the property originally. Really, that was very special. It was a wonderful gift to this town, which I'm thrilled that you all are using. I'm not a golfer. And that you want to preserve and protect. I think it's great. I love seeing this map. It's really fun. And Tim and I talked about some features on it that we don't quite know what ever happened to this development down in here. I have no idea what that's all about. But it's very exciting, and I just applaud you all for wanting to preserve this and keep golf alive in Lake Forest.
Thank you, Maddie. I would also point out that the land, he also donated land to the west, which is now the hospital. So, and this was their little summer place. But the point is that there's a lot of history in Deerpath Golf Course. And so the private partnership, we think, makes sense. And if you look at the institutions in Lake Forest, the Gorton Center, down at the lakefront, the marvelous beach facility, Market Square, Eloa Farm. When Lake Forest does something, it usually does it the right way. And so even though a lot of donors might belong to a private club, we think that there's enough history in this course to appeal to people who don't necessarily play golf here, to keep it preserved because of all the history involved. My fellow alderman from the First Ward, Prue Beidler, has a lot of experience in these private partnerships. She was deeply involved in Forest Park. And so I'd like to introduce her and have her say a few words. We hope to launch a public-private partnership campaign in the fall. We'll have a couple of years to raise money to try to get this course to where we want it. Prue?
I don't even want to get near this mic after hearing how it spits back, but we'll see. Maybe there's a distance or something. While this map is up here, let me just tell you, what I will tell you is I've been involved in both active fundraising for the Market Square public-private, Market Square 2000, and Forest Park. So I've done fundraising for other organizations too, but it's so much fun to do something in your own town, the place where you live. And I now have grandchildren growing up here, so I feel like You know, this is high stakes in my life. So the truth is, I'm not a golfer either. Although Mike Edelman, my fellow golfer, has persuaded me that I should take it up, and who knows, maybe this is what it's going to take to get me to do it. But I've certainly enjoyed talking about this, and I think there's enormous potential. And let me just read you. There are a number. One of the things that's exciting about this is there are a number of compelling cases, or what we would in fundraising say pitches, and the more people you can attract with the different things. So here, obviously, that you love this course and play golf is the obvious pitch to you. But there are other pitches to make, and I'm just going to read you a little bit. Some of you know, Maddie, what was Mr. Arpey's first name? Why am I, Howard? Edward Arpey. You're absolutely right. It was. Edward Arpey wrote a wonderful book about the history of Lake Forest, and actually, I don't know if it was somebody here, was it you who you did it? Thank you. So I'm going to quote that. It's a great book, and I had the book, but I hadn't looked at it and appreciate it. So let me just give you a couple of little pieces of this. The first parcel of land for the Deerpath Municipal Golf Course was received by Mayor Rumsey, obviously then the mayor, from A.B. Dick in the fall of 1922. It consisted of 70 acres. John Griffith then added 44 lots, Mayor Rumsey, and I'm wondering, Maddie, if that was it, because if it was 44 lots, that might be, could that have been the Griffith? Anyway, I'm not sure where the Griffith is on the map. Let's see, Mayor Rumsey and James Gordon then added other properties. Property owners on the western edge of Green Bay Road made additional gifts of land. These donors included Walter S. Brewster, William E. Cloud, Thomas Donnelly, Owen Jones, and Noble Judah. Several acres were bought by the syndicate to round out the golf course property. And I think you all know this, but let me just confirm. The only restrictions were that the course would be used for park purposes only, and that no trap shooting would occur on it, and if it ever should cease to function as a park or a public benefit, it would revert to the donors of the property. Mayor Rumsey was interested in the project as a community effort for the benefit of all. Okay, we're talking 90 years ago, actually more than 90 years ago, because the 90 is, I think, celebrates the opening of the course, but this is in 22 when it started. And this is where we get to the fundraising. And interestingly, a few years earlier, this is exactly how Market Square was built. So, and I'm trying to remember if they called it a syndicate with Market Square, but it was a bunch of people coming together to support the project. The Deerpath Syndicate comprised contributors of $1,000 or more towards this project. The list included, and it's a long list, P.D. Armour III, Lester Armour, B.L. Bear, Walter Brewster. The names go on, and a number of them would be familiar to you. And frankly, as somebody who did fundraising for Market Square, some of them are familiar to me because it was interesting. We in the middle of the Market Square project, the basement of the Griffith, Grant, and Lackey building, they discovered some things about the original Market Square donors. So many of them were the same people who're still in town doing stuff. Schweppe and so on here. So Rockefeller, McCormick features heavily. So the whole point of a syndicate is coming. Oh, I think the other thing you might be interested in, the course was laid out by Alex Peary of the Old Elm Club. And the cost per year, resident membership was $18 a year. So clearly times have changed slightly, I'm sure. I don't even know what the cost is now, but I'm guessing it's a little more than 18. So I'm sure it's very fair. And hopefully even it'll be an even more treasured thing to do, to join in when it's even more beautiful. So to you as golfers, clearly you're passionate about this, and I've talked to a number of people who just say there's just a magic about this course, and it needs to be improved. There's no question about this, and we talked about this at the city council level. It's got to be done. I mean, if it's going to remain a golf course, it deserves to be improved, and so then you figure out how to do it, and this seems like the right way, the private-public partnership. I would describe this, and I think Maddie would agree, but I think all of you would agree, this is a heritage amenity in this community. This has mattered in this community for 90 years. People who built Lake Forest, this is 1922, we were still a pretty new town in 1922. People who were shaping this town, and many of them belonged to other clubs. Apparently Old Elm was already in existence because somebody came from there to work on this course. This mattered. It mattered that people had a place, the public had a place to play golf. It still matters. And I think you pitch it the same way. This matters. This makes people attracted to the community. It's a course we value. We value it enough to improve it. It helps our property values. It helps bring more people to Lake Forest. To me, it's not going to be a hard sell. And I think the heritage amenity sell is to people, not just golfers. Okay, so I value this course. I don't play it at this point. Maybe Mike will persuade me that I should. But I think it's important to the community. And so that's a pitch that I'm completely comfortable making and having others make. This apparently has been a phenomenal children's program course, and I gather still is, and apparently we're almost bursting at the seams with the children's program. What that means is a lot of appreciative families. So that's a whole nother pitch to the families whose kids, this is a life sport. One of the things we all know about golf is you can do it forever. Starting out as a kid and doing it, I know people have probably been on teams in high school and college and so on, gone on to just love this sport in their lives. That's a thank you gift. And that was one of the approaches we used with Forest Park, that if you've raised your family in this community and the lakefront has mattered to you and the parks have mattered to you, this is a way to say thank you. So a thank you gift, and this is probably part of the way we'll pitch it to you all. It's a thank you gift. Think of the hours of pleasure you've had on this course, the commitment the city and others are going to make to improve it. So and the environmental piece is huge. We had with Forest Park a number of people who, they didn't anticipate being in the park much. They never had been much. It's a passive park, as you know. But boy, did they care about what we were doing with the earth and the water, how we were treating the water and the ravines and so on. So this one seems to me to have almost something for everyone, and I think we can structure it. We know how to do this in this town. We did not, with either Market Square or Forest Park, need to use bond money. And as you know, the beach was very definitely a bond project and had to be voted on and so on. And one I don't think a single person could ever regret. I mean, what a wonderful amenity. It would be lovely if we didn't. Now the city doing a bond is a little different than it being a referendum issue. So, but the great thing about this private fundraising is nobody has to do it. It's completely up to people and to make whatever contribution they want. You pitch broadly. Sometimes people say yes, sometimes they don't. And sometimes people say yes in a larger amount than you ask them for. So, but I think people in this town are pretty sophisticated about philanthropy, totally willing to be asked to contribute, and understand that they have a choice of saying yes or no. So one of our hopes, I'm going to try to be helpful with this project because I've done this a while and I know a little bit about it, but one of our hopes is that those of you who are passionate will step forward and say, sure, I'm glad to help, both with a check, which we'll obviously give you the opportunity to do, but also if there are people that you feel like you could go to and help make this case. And what we did, I think you probably know this, with both Forest Park and Market Square, have an entry point donation that gets you on a board. And obviously a donor board is always a nice thing because it's around for a long time. And so we'll have to think through what that is. So actually with Market Square it was $100. So it was a pretty easy price point. That wasn't phased, so that wasn't a pledge period. You just made a contribution. Forest Park was a 5-year pledge period. In fact, it's just incidentally, once a fundraiser, always a fundraiser. It's not too late. The end of that 5-year period is December 31st, 2017. So, and there will be a board there. There will be a donor board in perpetuity. So, it's kind of cool to be able to go and show your kids or your grandchildren or whatever that you cared about this project. Same thing here. I mean, we'll do some sort of a donor board. We'll figure it out. It'll be tasteful, but it'll be in a place everybody can see it. So, and sometimes people like to do that. I'm guessing here we would do probably at least a 3-year pledge period. Usually a bigger pledge period, you get a bigger gift. So anyway, a lot of details to talk about. We've already had a number of conversations about it. I think people feel like this could work. It's worked other places in town. There's no reason that it won't. And as I say, I think there's something for everybody. So I'm excited about it. Okay, is that what you wanted?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Prue. So some final questions or comments. We'll let you get out of here. Anybody? If not, I thank everyone for coming out tonight, and feel free to email myself or anyone on the Golf Advisory Committee if you think of something later. Thank you very much.